Hello, I am Monica Samuels. Welcome. I am the Vice President of Sake and Spirits for Vine Connections. We are an importer of South American wine and craft Japanese sake, also including a sake brewery here in New York. I've been working with sake my whole life, pretty much. My mother is born and raised in Japan, and as a child, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house in Tokyo. And my grandfather actually worked in a sake brewery. Sake was the first alcoholic beverage that ever crossed my lips. I've worked on all sides of this business, from restaurants to distribution and importing. And in 2017, I was awarded the prestigious title of Sake Samurai by the Japanese government. And I'm joined here today by my dear friend and favorite New York City sake cheerleader, Austin Power. And we are at Austin's new bar. So we're at Accidental Bar, right?
Accidental Bar. And it's called Accidental Bar because it literally happened to me by accident. Friends decided to close. I was a little tipsy on sake, said, what if I do it? And surprisingly, they said yes. So a month later, here we are.
So 1 month in, you guys are getting a little bit of a sneak peek of New York's hottest new sake bar. But if you are a New Yorker and you like sake, you probably have been served sake by this man at some point. He's worked at most of the sake institutions in New York City. And I love that you've been into sake for so long, because it's not necessarily what people expect.
True. And especially, Southern accent, silly person, serious sake. I fell in love with sake by drinking it with my Japanese expat friends who would sneak me into bars in college, and sake bars were the best. You can't really get away with that anymore. A scandala. But now I have my very own, where you have to be 21 to enter. I started working in sake 12 years ago. It's my favorite beverage. I met you at one of these wonderful events and fell in love with all of the sake community. And so I took it upon myself to make my job making more people drink more sake more irresponsibly.
I love that. I've never felt even remotely responsible leaving this place. So I would say you're doing a pretty good job. So I'm sure that since you took over a former space and we're in the East Village, this is a bar that you have a lot of people walking in who want to order a vodka soda, and you have to show them why they should be drinking sake and why they're going to love it, right?
Absolutely.
So how does that go? How do you start?
I hear two things a lot of the time. I don't really like sake, or I don't know that much about sake. And I'm here to tell you that's okay, because we do. You don't have to know nothing.
Yeah, I know. It's like these people know nothing about hard seltzers, but they're happy to drink 10 of them. I don't know why people think they have to be an expert on sake to drink it.
Yeah, what else are you an expert for when you're drinking?
Exactly.
It's what do you know about vodka soda? Where and how is that made? It's not important. What's important is that you have a good time with good friends. And if you can create a loving situation, hopefully people drink more.
And sake is a better buzz, right? I mean, I know that people are always saying how sake sneaks up on you and you always drink more than you planned on drinking, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I feel like in the grand scheme of alcoholic beverages, sake is one of the best things you could be drinking for your health. I think we're all thinking more about our health right now for various reasons, but I think most people know that sake is gluten-free, vegan, sulfite-free. It's really low in acid, which is great. I think there's so many reasons that people are avoiding acid. I know that the older I get, the more heartburn I get. I like to drink a lot of champagne when I'm not drinking sake, so that balances each other out.
Yes,
my dentist loves it because it doesn't erode your teeth enamel.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just a much more easy experience on your body. It's also surprisingly low in sugar. I'm sure people walk in here asking for dry sake all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked in restaurants, that was the first thing people asked for. And I was like, you don't really know what that means. Like sake is made from rice. It's not going to, and it's low acid. It's not going to be dry like a Pinot Grigio. Mm-hmm. But also, I think people are just worried about sugar. So when you calm them down by saying that sake is not high in sugar, then you can have a much better conversation about what people might be looking for in their sake.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much versatility in body and texture and flavor for sake that there is really something for everybody. And so I promise I can convert you. I will find one that you love.
Yes, he's up for the challenge. So let's talk about what sake is made from. So sake is made from rice. A lot of people call it a rice wine. It's actually brewed. I like to say it's built like a beer, but it drinks like a wine in the sense that, you know, you want to drink it out of a glass. Hopefully at home you're drinking it out of a wine glass. Austin's got these amazing glasses here that are really, really great for just experiencing the aroma. What's behind the shape of this glass?
So I fell in love with this glass because it reminds me of a very tiny solo cup. Takes me home to South Carolina. Feels very comfortable to drink out of, but you can still appreciate all of the finer flavors, aromas, textures, and it makes it very easy for me to sneakily teach you why the sake tastes the way it does after I've already made sure you like it.
Fancy solo cup. I love it, sticking to your roots. So sake is made from rice, and I think it's important to think about the rice when you're tasting, because if you go to a wine tasting and you stick your nose in a glass and you say it smells like grapes, people are going to think you don't know about wine. But all of this magic that's happening in the glass comes from rice and yeast. And so I think it is interesting as we taste, we'll hold your hand as we taste all four of these, to think about how the rice expresses itself. Sake is also made from water. Sake is 80% water. I like to say that you're just drinking water when you're drinking sake. It's just a lot more fun. You add water at every stage of production. So the texture and the minerality that you get is really an expression of the region and the water source. There's also an ingredient called Koji. So Koji is this magical mold. Koji is steamed rice that has this enzyme propagated on it that converts starch into sugar. So it makes it possible to ferment, but also it gives you all the umami in sake. So umami is this very sexy word that's very hard to define, right? It's the fifth sense. There's sweet, sour, salty, bitter, and then this extra depth of enjoyment and savory and delicious. So the Koji gives you a lot of more mushroomy, nutty, cocoa notes that we'll get on some of these sakes. And then yeast. All alcohol requires yeast to eat sugar and produce alcohol, but the yeast works extra hard in sake. When we taste these sakes, you'll hear us talking about banana and watermelon and, you know, pumpkin, and all of those aromas come from how the yeast functions during fermentation. So super clean beverage, just 4 ingredients, and basically good for you.
And delicious. And I do want to say, don't be scared of the word fruit when you see descriptions of sake, because the fruit that we're talking about is like biting into the fresh fruit. No artificial flavors. Exactly.
How many times do you tell someone that something smells like raspberry and they're like, when did you add the raspberries to the sake? It's all natural. So today we are going to focus on Tozai as a brand. So Tozai means East meets West. If you go to a big city in Japan, like Tokyo or Kyoto, there's a Tozai train line that runs through the city that connects the East and West, which is kind of our intention with this brand. We wanted to take sake, this really, really sacred beverage, and from a culture that we love and appreciate so much, and bring it to the US and make it possible for everyone to enjoy, kind of like what you're doing here at the bar. So Tozai is from Kyoto, birthplace of sake and Japan's former capital. Definitely, if you are visiting Japan, I feel like Kyoto's on everyone's bucket list because it's just stunning. I remember you were trying to buy a house in Kyoto last time,
yes,
like a year ago.
The web looking beautiful.
Yeah, and the icon for Tozai is the koi fish. As a Japanese person, it's really important to me that everything about Tozai is authentic and really honors Japanese culture. I really didn't want a sake that had a panda on the cup or just something that looked cute and vaguely Asian. So koi fish are really important in Japan. They can live to over 200 years. And every generation of the family that owns Tozai was a competitive swimmer. So kind of interesting tie-in there. And we are tasting 4 products from Tozai today. We do have a full lineup that is behind me here. We have everything from Futsushu, which is table sake that represents what people in Japan drink on a day-to-day basis, to a all-natural plum sake that's made with Japanese plums, which are super like racingly sour and give this really nice tart, tangy characteristic to the sake. But I think we're gonna get started with Night Swim, which is in a can. I'm just gonna grab a can for us. And if you are drinking at home, I would suggest drinking the cans right out of the can, because this is all about being portable. It's not about you need a wine glass to pour it into. So we're gonna drink out of the can. And as you can see, I took a sip of mine earlier, but Austin's going to show you the whole experience. So there is a resealable top, and then the second top peels right off. So if you don't finish the whole can in one sitting, which I mean, we're not here to judge you, But if you don't finish it one sitting, you can put the lid back on, stick it in your pocket, stick it in your purse, take it really anywhere.
Yes.
And it doesn't look like alcohol. So it's, you can take it all kinds of places where you're not supposed to be drinking.
Absolutely.
And night swim is kind of fun, right? I always think of skinny dipping when you say night swim, it sounds a little naughty.
Yes, beautiful.
And so night swim is a futsushu, which is, it is that table sake that people drink more on a day-to-day basis in Japan. So when you think about this style of sake, it should be a little more rustic, like more of that umami, more nutty, more rich, a little more acidity. So, kanpai, cheers. So even though you're drinking from the can, since the whole top comes off, you can really stick your nose in, experience the aroma. For me, all sake has lactic acid in production. And I think, so there's a level of like dairy or creaminess that comes out of certain sakes. And this to me is like milky on the nose.
Yes.
More like banana, orange, banana nut bread. We always say that you should have a night in with night swim. This is 14% alcohol, so it's just like a really nice mellow way to have a nice night in. I think it pairs really well with things that you just have in your house. You don't need to have a fancy sushi dinner to enjoy a camp night swim.
No, absolutely not.
What would you have with this?
Oh.
My go-to is always, I don't know why this sake makes me want to eat Pringles so much. It's something that I almost always have in the house, but that like just slightly salty and crunchy with like the juxtaposition of the texture, the creamy night swim, and having something really, really crunchy is delicious.
Absolutely.
This is a tiny can. Hopefully it won't take you too long to drink it, but sake does come in all shapes and sizes. We have 180 mLs, 300 mLs, 720s, 1.8 liters. We even have sake in keg. And one of the great things is how long you can leave a bottle open for, right?
Absolutely. That's something people always ask me. They think it's going to go off in the fridge like wine, but it's not true. So how long should we typically keep sake?
Well, I feel like with wine, there's a point of no return, right?
Absolutely.
You're like, I have to pour this down the sink no matter how badly I want to have a glass of this. I've honestly never poured sake down the sink. I probably have 30 bottles that are open in my fridge. And I like to date them to see how they, like some of them, you can beat them up a little more than others. I have sakes that have been open in my fridge for 6 months and they just get a little quieter. They're not you're not going to have a sake that's been open for 6 months at Accidental Bar, but if you're coming to my house, I might serve you one and you're going to be just fine.
I also like that the texture tends to double down and get a little bit more velvety the longer that the bottles are open. And so you really get to experience all different levels. Sake does not oxidize the same way as wine. That's part of the process of it being brewed. Absolutely.
So if you are opening all 4 of these, we totally encourage you to finish them all today. But if you don't want to, save them for the weekend, save them for next week. They're still going to taste great. All right. So I think we're going to stick to this progression. And after night swim, we'll do the living jewel. And so one of the nice things about sake culture, I mean, we encourage you to break the rules and have fun, but some of the cultures are really fun to practice, like pouring for others. I think it's just, we just had a pandemic where there was not a lot of pouring for others, but in general, it's a really nice gesture of hospitality and just making sure that you're taking care of other people by keeping their glass full. I also like to recommend to hold the bottle with both hands. It's just a really nice way to respect the sake. I did say that without demonstrating once, and I had a bartender start pouring like this. So both hands on one bottle. So we're tasting Living Jewel next. Living Jewel is a Jumbai Socket, so pure rice sake. I think we are going to, being a pure rice sake and kind of the sake that celebrates rice, we are going to get more ricey notes on this one. Kind of a gentle steamed rice, but more fruit, more fresh fruit on this one too. Like I always get like purple grapes and lemon curd. Maybe something a little tropical, like a little bit of mango.
I really appreciate the creaminess of the texture, but we have that beautiful strong bite at the finish. So if any of your friends like having a martini, for example, this is going to do a lot of those beautiful textural elements as well. It'll give them all the same evocation, but they won't be so tipsy that they fall off the boat. It's great.
Yeah, it's a journey texturally, right? And it's kind of silky in the mid palate and has that crisp finish. And I talked to a lot of sommeliers who are so used to thinking about structure in wine when they think about tannin and acidity. And sake doesn't have those anchors, but it feels really structured, right? You have a start, middle, and finish to enjoying the sake. I would say it's lighter bodied than the Night Swim, and so it makes me want to have. I mean, Pringles would still be delicious here, but I'm thinking more like baby carrots and hummus, or
Delightful.
yeah, like something a little fresh that has a crunch, but maybe is a little healthier.
Yes.
All right, that was Living Jewel. We should finish our glasses and then we can try the next one. So it's summer. We're always talking about the summer of sake. I know you think a lot about seasonality and what you should be drinking like right this second, right?
Right this second, yeah, because all of these things are going to be delicious, but in certain weather, they are even more enhanced. And one of the things I find is that people want to know when, where, how, why, with whom should I be drinking sake? The answer is everyone, anywhere and anytime. But more specifically, if you take a beautiful chilled bottle of sake to the park or to the beach, with wine, you have to worry about that warming up. Nobody wants a 98-degree glass of rosé. Sake, however, is so versatile at so many different temperatures that you can leave it in the sand. You can go on a whole journey, and yourself and your beverage both benefit from the location.
There's literally nothing else that you can do that with. No. I mean, you do not want to take a bottle of rosé to the beach and leave it in the sun. And it's amazing to see how there's something really thirst quenching about sake too. And I think it is the fact that it's brewed. There's something about beer being really thirst quenching compared to wine, and sake has that same satisfaction on a hot day, but even if you drink it at room temperature, which cannot be said for rosé.
No.
So if you did pull these out of the fridge, I would let them evolve on the kitchen counter, see how you like it closer to room temperature. There's really no right or wrong answer, as long as it's going in your body.
Yeah. So
next we are going to try Well of Wisdom. This is a ginjo sake. So ginjo in general refers to more highly polished rice. So you're going to have more purity in the sake and a colder, slower fermentation. So you're going to create these more exuberant aromas that really jump out of the glass. So we're expecting fresh and fruity here. Who doesn't love fresh and fruity?
Fresh and fruity. I had a nickel for every time I've been called that.
So, Well of Wisdom. On the nose, I do think this is bright, fresh and fruity. Yes. I get a lot of watermelon, like freeze-dried raspberries. But there's a nut note here that I think is really nice, like a pistachio on the nose. Just really bright and vibrant and crisp. I think if you are looking for like a crushable rosé, like a patio pounder kind of sake, this would be
divine.
Yeah.
If you need to impress a mother-in-law,
yes,
great. Get everybody involved.
Yeah. So these are both around 15% alcohol. We started with 14% with the Night Swim, but not a huge variation here. And so you really can sip it like wine. I think a lot of people look at a glass of sake and it looks more like vodka than wine, and so they're like, oh, should I do a shot of this? Should I be like, I had a sip, I probably shouldn't drive. And it's not, you don't need to feel that way. Just drink it casually. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make you a better person.
And more interesting.
I feel like we could go a little spicy here with this one. Like, I love the sweet and spicy combination, like Thai food.
Absolutely.
Pad Thai, or like a red coconut milk curry, something like papaya salad. I feel like would be great with this.
So really beautiful bolognese I had years ago, and that's exactly what I want to do with this.
So for the fourth sake, I would, if it's all right with everyone, I'd like to taste it first, and then we're going to make a little cocktail with it. So the Snow Maiden cans. If you do look on the back of the can, it says to shake it up. So please do so. Don't feel like you're going to shake it too hard. It's not sparkling. The can's not going to explode. If you did follow instructions and keep yours in the freezer, it might be getting a little slushy right now. Here you are.
Thank you so much.
Shake, shake, shake. The reason that we're shaking is because nigori means cloudy. And so the cloudiness in the sake comes from dissolved rice during fermentation. So due to gravity, that is going to settle at the bottom. So when you're shaking it up, you're just reintegrating those solids. And the solids are totally natural byproduct of making sake. So I have a very visceral memory that like pops into my mind when I'm sticking my nose in the sake, and it's a really good memory. It's of carving a pumpkin. Like there's like something about like a sweet, like raw, like that like kind of nostalgic pumpkin note, but there's also this really juicy melon, like total honeydew melon.
For me, it's like I just remember eating beautiful fresh cantaloupe in my backyard. It's delightful.
Yeah, I feel like I want to drink this out of a cantaloupe.
Oh yes. Oh, yeah.
Like the way they do the watermelon vodka thing. Okay, so we can't drink too much of this because we're about to make a cocktail with it. But I would say this is even more delicious than with spicy food than Well of Wisdom even. Like if you pair this with those Korean chicken wings, like those really sticky, spicy chicken wings, it's phenomenal. It can handle, don't hold back. This can handle a lot of spice and a lot of flavor. So we sent you these matcha packets and these agave packets. I would put like, depending on your tolerance for the bitterness of matcha, I would put up to half the packet in here. It's totally up to you. And then with agave, I mean, you tasted the sake on your own just now, so you know the sweetness level. Because matcha is bitter, I would definitely add agave to balance that out. But how sweet you want to go is totally up to you. I'm probably going to add like half of this. And then because you stuck this in the freezer and it has a resealable lid, you don't need to use a shaker. You can just make your own cocktail on the go, which is great. One thing I learned during COVID is that I hate doing dishes. So the less of that, the better. We're going to shake really hard to integrate all the matcha. Also a workout. Back to sake is good for you benefits.
Absolutely. And the cans are delightful, so you can keep them, you can reuse them as cups.
Yeah.
If one of your friends is clumsy and your wine glass is too nice, just repurpose.
Yeah, they're really great storage because it is airtight with the lid. Like I store a lot of spices in my cans. All right, I think we're good. And it's frothy. It looks like a matcha latte. I love that. I feel like the sake still comes out. I get so excited when I see a sake cocktail on the menu and then you order it and you just taste everything else. So when you make sake cocktails, I would say you can always add more ingredients later, but you can't take them away. So just try to be really subtle. I've been drinking sake cocktails most of my career. I started in New York City working at a Japanese fusion restaurant that was very like Sex in the City. It was 2003. Everyone was ordering these ridiculous like mojitos with 55 ingredients. And we had a trick where we would put sake in every cocktail, no matter what they ordered. And it was kind of training people's palates to get ready to drink sake. This is 2003. People were drinking like hot sake in carafes, but all of a sudden, if you ordered a strawberry mango martini, like you would have a little bit of sake in there and you would love it. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with this.
I'm very happy with it.
Matcha is healthy. It has lots of antioxidants. We're just looking out for you here. So we have a lot of other sake. If you have any curiosity and would like to dive a little deeper, we've been thinking a lot about sake. Well, we think a lot about sake all the time, but we've been thinking about sake lately in terms of how it relates to the Olympics, which start next Friday. Kind of a miracle that it's actually happening this year, given all of the challenges. But the Olympics are something that are really important to me, or were just really important to my family. It was the first time that the Olympics were held in Japan in 1964 that really started this luxury boom in Japan. It was such a huge stimulus to the economy, and it made things like premium sake possible. A premium sake has been around for centuries, but it wasn't until the second half of the 1900s that premium sake was a thing and got into distribution. And I know a lot of people think about the Olympics as the catalyst for all of that good fortune that it brought to Japan. And although the Olympics will be very different this year, there's still a lot of similar sentiments. And for me, one of the ones that speaks to me the most is single serving sake. So it was when the Olympics were first held in Japan that the cup sake was first introduced in Japan, or the can sake. And sake has been around forever in Japanese culture, but the most common format was 1.8 liters. Really great if you're coming to accidental bar and they will pour you lots of it, but hardly portable. So these cans, these 1 cups were made for Olympic spectators, and all of a sudden, 1 cup single serving sakes became something that you could drink on the train, that you would take to sporting events, to picnics. All of a sudden, cherry blossom viewing was so much more fun. And I just think, it's been so long since then, but the best way to honor that legacy is to drink a can of sake while you're watching the Olympics. We will be following up with everyone and sending this guidebook, but I know that a lot of us are getting wanderlust, especially as it comes to traveling to Japan. I know it's so high on people's bucket lists, and it's the most special place to me. And so we put together a guidebook to not only watching the Olympics and the different sports, but a deeper dive on the regions where most of the events are happening, talking about some of our producers that are related to those regions, and just some of my favorite places to hit when you're in the region, from restaurants to sightseeing to places to stay. So we will please keep an eye out for that. And if you'd like to learn a little more about any of our portfolio, if you have any specific sake questions outside, we will be doing Q&A, but please follow up with me. My email is going into the chat. I think that it's monica@vineconnections.com, or follow up with our amazing partners whose emails will be in the chat as well. And hopefully we can, if you are in New York City, hopefully you can make it to Austin's bar. It's a guaranteed good time. Hopefully there's no question about that so far.
Yes. Come for the party, leave a little smarter.
Exactly. So I think we have some Q&A.
The first question is, what is the difference between sake that is served warm versus sake that you should serve chilled?
That's a good question. And I would have a very specific answer if it was what was the difference between sake served hotter than a cup of coffee in a white ceramic carafe that you did shots of, or sake that's served chilled. Sake is a huge spectrum of temperature, just like Austin was saying. It's still going to taste good if you forget about it in the trunk of your car for 3 hours while you're on the beach. But it's not what you're getting when you order hot sake at a restaurant, where it doesn't even specify what the sake is.
Yes.
Is not great. We do not recommend that.
And I would like to specify, really the words lean more towards warm.
Yeah.
Warm sake. Hot, if someone microwaved it, you are in the danger zone.
Yeah. Don't
be a little
microwave
careful.
things in general.
But outside of that, the kind of baseline in the middle is room temperature and your body temperature, which has a lot to do with the glassware that we drink out of. Even the glass that we're using today, it will conduct a little bit of your body heat. So it makes the sake drinking experience more personal. That's the reason behind a lot of this beautiful glassware. But the versatility of individual sakes is so diverse and magical that it's really up to personal preference.
Yeah, like when you're drinking out of these fancy solo cups, your body temperature will change and it'll evolve, which is really fun to see. It's a personal preference. I would say, we give a very long answer. I would say the short answer is that the more fresh and fruity a sake is, the more chilled you should drink it.
Absolutely.
And the more umami and savory and rustic notes, the better it will perform at room temperature, or even a little warmer.
And if you're getting beautiful rice tones and that nice bite, it seems counterintuitive, but as it gets warmer, it will get softer.
Totally. Sake can do anything. It's really amazing.
It's amazing.
The next question is, what makes Night Swim a table sake versus, say, Living Jewel?
So that's a great question in terms of what makes Night Swim a table sake. So table sake, Japan did not have access to a lot of rice. It wasn't until after World War II that there was enough rice to really make pure rice sake. And so it started this culture of adding distilled alcohol to sake. When you get the aforementioned hotter than a cup of coffee sake in that white ceramic carafe, there's a ton of added alcohol. They can add up to 50% distilled alcohol. And if you think sake gives you a hangover, it's not the sake. It's all the other stuff that they're putting in there. But table sake is still, there can be really great table sake. And so like, I think when you go to wine producing countries, the table wine's amazing. And then you come home and you look for it and you just see like box wine that's not amazing. And so a lot of table sake just doesn't leave the country like table wine. The Knight's Rim is a really good example of high quality table sake that you would drink just casually in Japan.
Yeah, the futsushu has been a category that's been recently introduced to the US because a lot of the premium sake market was also part of marketing and getting people to enjoy the pinnacle of the product so that we could educate and change people's mind about it. But so many beautiful futsushus.
Exactly. So Living Jewel is pure rice sake, and that is what Jumbai is. But futsushu, the added alcohol gives it some nice sturdiness and structure and some weight, like going back and forth between these. This is so light compared to the Knight's Rim. So it's really kind of a personal preference. Absolutely. I find myself drinking more and more futsushu the more I get just underwater in this category.
Yes. And I'm going to add one short addendum, but because people know that the non-Jumbai category adds a little bit of distilled spirit, people always think that one's going to be sharper, but in fact, the chemical reaction softens the edges and enhances the aroma, where Jumbai is going to give you that light, clean, crisp flavor you're looking for.
Yes, it's counterintuitive, but he is completely correct. Like if you think about how round and creamy that Knight's Rim was compared to the Living Jewel, and you said it yourself, like Living Jewel is a little sharp on the edge in comparison.
It's beautiful.
We have an attendee that recently fell in love with Nama sake. Could you explain a little bit about what Nama is and who makes it and if we distribute it?
Yeah, so Nama means alive. And so it really is living sake that's completely raw. The brewing season in Japan is generally October to anywhere between March to May, depending on the season, the climate of the brewery, and their personal philosophy. And so if you go to Japan in the late winter, you taste a lot of living sake that's freshly pressed, and it's amazing. It's really raw and brash and youthful. I know a lot of sake purists that won't drink Nama sake because they're like, the sake is too in your face. It hasn't evolved, it hasn't settled. And you know, a lot of the attitude about sake is like sushi. I mean, there's some really expensive sushi in New York City. They're all kind of buying it from the same people, but it's the skill of the sushi chef in aging and maturing the fish that makes that guy able to charge $400 a dinner versus the other guy charging $150. And so the maturation of sake is an art form, but having this like raw, fresh sake is super fun. We do a yearly seasonal offering of Nama sakes from a handful of our producers. Austin's actually carrying one at his bar right now. And we also have a year-round Nama available from our brewery in New York. We work with Brooklyn Kura, and one of the advantages of working with American craft sake is that they make sake year-round. You can always have freshly pressed sake.
Why do you think sake makes such a great base for cocktails?
Well, in the spirit of being healthier, sake doesn't need that much added to it, right? I mean, I think it's so susceptible to anything you add, and so dropping an orange peel into a glass of sake will totally disrupt the profile and change it. Dropping a jalapeno slice will totally change it, and so you can make a really healthy cocktail. And I personally like to think about cocktails more based on infusions rather than mixing a bunch of stuff in them. Like making, like brewing, doing a cold brew, like a fruity tea with sake is delicious.
Absolutely.
It's just, I mean, it's another way to enjoy it. It's lighter, it's fresher.
And lower ABV than traditional cocktails. So if you want to enjoy something over a long period of time, but not be quite as live at the end, you know, a sake cocktail is a great option.
We had a question that a lot of sake they've enjoyed in the past has been very salty, but they didn't find Tozai to be salty. Can you explain why some would skew a little saltier versus other sake?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question because like back in the day, people used to drink sake out of these 180 ml boxes, and you've probably seen these masu boxes. And the way that it was drank, keeping in mind that back in the day, sake was not premium. So it was like, had a lot of distilled alcohol added, was pretty rough around the edges. And you would have a little bit of salt on the edge of the masu cup that was supposed to kind of correct the sake. And so if there was anything really off-putting or harsh or unpleasant, having that salt would erase those flavors. And so my guess is that salt is added to a lot of these more bulk sakes to make them more palatable and to kind of balance out any impurities. And even there's a saying that if you want to have a great time, like if you want to go out drinking in Japan and you can't afford to go to an izakaya, just buy a dish of salt, because that's like some of the magic of like izakaya food, like Japanese pub food is really salty, and drinking sake with it like really brings out the deliciousness in the sake. But I'm guessing the salt's added for.
Well, I find that sake from Kanagawa, because of the water source, and they do a lot of surfing there, and I don't know how exactly that ties in, but I find Kanagawa sakes to have a little bit more salt. And then also from your portfolio, the incredible seaside.
Oh, the seaside, yeah.
Seaside, but also, yes, endless summer I was talking about, but the seaside where the sake is aiming to give you the experience of the oyster bay, is also really delightful and has a beautiful salinity to it as well. So I think there's a locale base, and then I also feel like maybe there's some edit.
Yeah, like I think like Austin's taking a very fancy approach to this and talking about,
yeah,
he's very fancy. He's talking about salinity and like coastal influence.
But I think about that a lot though, because I also too really enjoy sakes with some of that salinity and salty influence.
Totally.
Can you give any tips of people who are new to sake, if they walk into a liquor store or restaurant, what are some terms or things to look for that would help kind of guide them to the flavor profile that they're looking for?
So the first advice that I have is you want to walk in and feel confident that these people actually care about sake. There's nothing more depressing than seeing like 3 really dusty bottles of sake on the bottom shelf next to the schnapps and like the cooking wine in a retailer, and they look like they've been there since the 90s. So you want to see sake front and center, big selection. I like to talk about flavor profile more than polishing rates. You know,
Right.
I think Junmai Ginjo, it's hard for a lot of people to say, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything in the glass. Like if you know that you like fresh and fruity, or you know you like savory and soulful, walking into a store or restaurant and saying that is much better. I mean, you run a bar, so
Right.
what, like for someone to come in, what's the most helpful thing they could say to you to where you would direct them towards?
What I always ask first is, what are the top 2 favorite things you like to drink that have alcohol in them? And based on that, we can make a lot of decisions for you. But that's really, really helpful. Being general is the worst. Be specific. You can tell me like, oh, I like a really dirty martini. That's very, very classic. Someone was like, I like shots of Sambuca. Awesome. I will find you something and it's going to be delightful, but just be specific. And that's the best way to get help. And be honest. Don't be ashamed of it. Live your life. You know?
Absolutely.
Just tell us what you like.
We know a lot about sake, and there's lots of things we know nothing about. So
Yeah, that's fine.
We have time for 2 more questions. The first is, you mentioned some about the minerality of the sake. Can you share a little bit more about how the water is used and the importance of water in the sake making process?
Yeah, absolutely. So water is added at every stage of the process. So, you know, the first step after you steam the rice, well, you wash the rice after polishing, you soak the rice. So during soaking, the rice is going to take on a lot more water, which is one of the reasons that sake can be non-vintage. You know, if you have a dry year, a wet year, you can correct for that in the soaking. And after the koji is formed, the yeast starter process, you add more water. Every stage of building from a yeast starter to a full tank, fermentation tank, you add more water. And then after the sake is fully made, you generally dilute with water. Sake can ferment to 18 to 20% alcohol, and these are more 14 to 15%, so they do have some water dilution. And the water source for breweries is generally a well within the brewery, and water reaches that well either underground water streams or snow melting on mountains trickling down to that well. And so depending on the location, you know, Austin referenced a very like maritime, coastally located brewery where there's going to be a lot of salinity. Where there's high mountain ranges and lots of snow, the water tends to be very low mineral, because that passageway for snow melting and trickling down to the well is like a natural filter that pulls out minerals. So there is, you know, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not there's terroir in sake, but the water really is a regional reflection of where it's made.
it is and how hard or soft the water is, if that means anything to you, really changes the expression of aroma as well. Harder water tends to be a little bit more strict.
Totally.
And as the water gets softer, you can open up more aroma. And then,
Yeah, it's much more generous.
yeah, it's beautiful. Water is amazing.
And our last question, we want to hear from both of you what your Olympic watch party will look like, what kind of sake you're going to be drinking, and what kind of pairings you're going to be doing.
So I'm very excited that surfing and skateboarding are official Olympic sports because it's awesome and like just Japanese surfing is so different. So I'm really excited to watch surfing and skateboarding. I'm also very competitive. So I will be facilitating a lot of drinking games and no matter what happens, we're all gonna get drunk. So no matter who wins. And I'm not super, I don't know, this time I haven't really been that emotionally attached to any of the athletes. Well, some, not in surfing and skateboarding. What about you?
I just really live for gymnastics, all of it. It's my highlight of the Olympics every year since I was a child, which probably says a lot about me, but yeah, delightful. And in terms of what sake I'll be serving, literally everything and anything. Let's get weird.
Yeah, so if you have any other questions, like I said, my email is Monica, MONICA @vineconnections.com. I know that it's in the chat, but please, when you're in New York, make sure that going to Accidental Bar is on your list. You won't regret it. Bring some friends. They've only been around for a month, so you can still get in before the word gets out.
And you can find me on Instagram at Accidental Bar NYC. You can also send me a DM if you need some recommendations. Let's get weird. I love it.
Let's do it. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to go drink some more sake. And yeah, please have a summer of sake.